Thanks everyone for being here. Going to take a little bit of a departure now and talk to you about uranium. Some people call it the other yellow metal, yellow cake. It's actually not. That's just the oxide form of it. But we at enCore are building on quite a legacy. It's combining two teams from very successful past endeavors. I, like everyone else, will be making some forward-looking statements. We're focused 100% on in situ development of American uranium resources. Primarily in Texas, with lesser operations, or future operations rather, in Wyoming and South Dakota, as well as New Mexico. Uranium, if you've been in the business long enough, there were a few good years a while back. The real glory time was 50 years ago before 3 Mile Island. We've had about 5 good years since, which has ended up providing the industry with a great shortfall in terms of technical talent. Our particular company came out of the 2005 to 2008 timeframe with Energy Metals Corp. I was co-founder and chairman of that, along with Paul Matisek. We compiled the biggest resource base in the U.S. history, going from 17 cents to $17, ultimately selling out to Uranium One. While we were busy doing that, our CEO, Paul Goranson, was busy building a plant from the ground up in Texas in a little under a year and a half, in situ, again showing the speed and economics of such, and was actually able to sell uranium during that giant spike on the left at $135 a pound. Paul has since brought in several of his people to join ours. After spending a couple of years on the Uranium One board, I left and took some of the folks with me, and we started enCore. Somewhat interesting timing right before Fukushima, but we'd raised some money and obviously didn't have any reason to spend it following Fukushima for the decade of darkness, as we call it. In any event, the one thing we were able to do was to not only keep our key team of very talented individuals. In fact, I'd put our team up against any in the world, with possible exception of Kazakhstan, in terms of ISR expertise. We were able to keep that team and build it during the dark times there, and also increase our asset base considerably. And with Paul coming on and joining us to lead the ship with some of his people, it's truly an elite ISR team. Here again, ISR solution mining. You inject oxygenated groundwater, dissolve the uranium, pump it to the surface. Very environmentally friendly. Profound differences and advantages in terms of the CapEx, the permitting, operations, and reclamation. Here again, you can see all of our assets strung out through the western U.S. Our primary focus areas are Texas and Wyoming, here again with South Dakota added. Texas and Wyoming are importantly what they call agreement states. That is, we don't deal with the federal government. It's only the state government in terms of the radiation standards. So as you might well imagine, a much quicker, smoother time frame to get into production. When we saw things transitioning and brought Paul on, we also made a commitment to get quite active, and as such we acquired the former assets of Uranium Resources, which were held by Westwater Resources. Key amongst those were 2 plants, fully permitted, licensed in situ plants in Texas. This came with a good piece of real estate down there, several pieces of real estate, including those mineralized with uranium, former well fields that have yet to be produced, and key is 2 of only 11 licensed plants in the U.S. In addition to that, we got an incredible resource base in New Mexico, New Mexico being the largest resource in the U.S. in terms of uranium, both past production and current resources. And we hold well in excess of 50% of that with almost 500 square miles of mineral rights. Our current resource base is 90 million pounds in the measured and indicated category, 9 million pounds of inferred, in addition to about 70 million pounds of historic. And we're continuing to find additional resources and add those to the base, with primary areas of focus being Texas and Wyoming. Market cap's a little under 400 million. Shares outstanding 321 million. We do have almost 27 million US in the bank. Recent financing provided us the avenue to revenue from our first production. Our first contracts for uranium sales are in 2023. I would point out that the Inside Industry newsletter, UXC, reported only 2 North American companies with sales contracts for 2023, that being ourselves and Cameco. So we're in very good company with that. The board, I won't go over this. As you can see, almost everyone here has been deeply involved with the uranium industry for 30 to 40 years. I already noted Paul Goranson, who's in the audience with us today. Dr. Stover was one of the two individuals responsible for inventing the in situ process many years ago. He remains our Chief Technical Officer, and you can take a look at this either at our booth, come talk to us, or in our presentation, but quite an elite team. The other thing that's very much important here that I would mention is the fact that we picked up about 26 people in the field that have actually operated the uranium plants. So it's not just a very deep bench in terms of the board and the knowledge of the board, and it's also the people that are actually on the ground that are working at the plants, and you'll see a picture of many of those later. One woman I would note here, Susan Hoxsey, our most recent addition to the board. I think we're probably the only uranium company with an actual consumer-based member of the board. She spent nuclear engineer by training and spent many years for the Southern Company in Georgia. And having her join us really rounds out our broad-based knowledge and accreditation in the fuel cycle. There's a lot more to uranium than just selling uranium. You've got conversion, enrichment, fabrication, use in the power plant, and then ultimately reclamation. So it's a very deep cycle of knowledge, and some of those are alternate priced mechanisms for entry into the uranium market by our ultimate consumers, the nuclear utilities. I won't spend a lot of time on this because I'm sure you're all aware of the unique situation we're in where with the green energy and the carbon focus, nuclear is making quite a renaissance. We're certainly at the forefront of that. First time in 50 years since 3 Mile Island, we've got bipartisan support in the U.S. for nuclear energy. Right now, nuclear produces about 20% of the uranium in the U.S., yet 55% of the carbon neutral or green energy. So it's certainly a up-and-coming subject, if you will. This is our pipeline for production. Our Texas assets, as I mentioned, we have sales contracts in 23 coming out of the Rosita plant, which is just in the final stages of complete modernization. It'll be ready to go here within the next month or so. Then you can see us transitioning into South Dakota, where we have the Dewey Burdock project, 17 million pound resource. It's currently NRC permitted, still has a few of the smaller permits to go. And then Wyoming, where we have Gas Hills and other properties emerging. Gas Hills is about 8 or 9 million pounds. And then ultimately into New Mexico, which is the real storehouse of value. By the time we get through all of that, we'll be looking at 7 million pounds a year production, something like that. But here again, that's looking at 5 or 6 years. Our focus is entirely on 2023 and meeting our deadlines on the Texas operations. Here again, what we're working on, the Rosita plant, as I mentioned, is in the final stages of modernization. The Rosita extension, we're currently drilling the well field, delineating that, as well as putting in the monitor rings. When you're doing in situ, you have to put monitor rings outside of your uranium deposit where you're injecting and pumping out the oxygenated solution to make sure it doesn't escape. That's well underway. Another advantage of the company is our incredible data access. We've got access to probably aside from Cameco and perhaps another major or two, the largest database in the proprietary database in the field, certainly in the U.S. And we're continuing to add important ISR amenable projects in Texas. Our uranium trail strategy is a very balanced one. As I mentioned, we have sales contracts. We have 3 of them concluded with customers. We're looking to conclude another one shortly. And we're committing a certain portion of our production, typically something up to 50% to contract sales, to make sure that we have a good basis of cash flow, sound business practices, and still maintaining the other half of our production capacity with exposure to the spot markets to take advantage of what we think will be a rather outstanding time going forward. Here's the map of Texas. As I mentioned, the time dates you've already seen. Quite an endowment left in Texas, as you can see there, USGS estimating 220 million pounds left. This is actually a picture of our plant when it was in operation last time, about 2008. It's going to look better than that here in the next few weeks. So, South Dakota, as I mentioned. Wyoming, our phase 3 project. Here again, about 8 million pounds. Good ISR grades. Wyoming, again, being an agreement state. So the investment summary is we're clearly focused on revenue, path to production, a strong pipeline of projects that will be additive to one another as opposed to linear. We've already started the permitting process in Wyoming, well advanced in South Dakota, so these should come right in on our timelines. And so our phased expansion and the focus on clean, reliable energy puts us in a very good place. I welcome any of your questions afterwards. Please feel free to check out our booth at PDAC, and thank you for your time.